Recently, Recently, there have been a lot of big forest fires in the news. You've had the fires in Australia that have lasted weeks, and before that, you had the fires in the Amazon. And every year, you hear about massive wildfires in California. Wildfires are becoming an increasingly big issue for the entire world, but more specifically the US, as large sections of American forests are at high risk of fires. According to the Insurance Information Institute, in 2019, the US had over 50,000 forest fires, and in Minnesota alone, we had over 1,000. Now, a lot of these are small fires, but it only takes one of these fires to create the same scale of fire as seen in the Amazon or Australia. To help mitigate this risk, the U.S. Forest Service should implement a policy of proactive controlled burns to the U.S.'s larger forests. This is an issue that we deal with already, and is an issue that could lead to a massive tragedy in the future if nothing is done. And this is our fault because of our own past policies, which is why it's important that we implement new policies such as proactive controlled burns to help mitigate and eliminate these risks. Currently, large sections of American forests are at high risk of wildfires. One's not wrong to blame climate change, but it is not the major contributor here. According to the National Association of State Foresters, fire seasons today are 78 days longer than in 1970. And these wildfires that do happen are a lot bigger, as according to the 2019 Wildfire Risk Report published in CoreLogic, 11 of the last 19 years have ended with wildfires larger than 70 million acres burned. This is important because 70 million acres being burned annually has been the average for the last 50 years, and we are now exceeding it. However, climate change, again, is not the main thing responsible for here. That would be our own policies. More specifically, this is the result of a singular past policy created back in 1935. According to the Forest History Society, this was dubbed the 10 a.m. policy and was created by the U.S. Forest Service. It was a zero-tolerance policy that decreed that every fire should be put out by 10 a.m. the following morning. And this policy was a central tenet to the Forest Service during this time, and out of it came campaigns such as Smokey the Bear's Only You Can Prevent Forest Fires. The issue with a zero-tolerance policy is that it is extremely detrimental to the forests themselves, and it can create the conditions for even more severe forest fires in the future. Now, how does this happen? In nature, natural forest fires are not terribly uncommon. However, they are nowhere near the 50,000 mark experienced in 2019. They're a part of the natural cycle of things, and when they do sweep through, they do one very important job. They clear debris. Now, this debris is just any organic matter on the ground in forests: logs, sticks, leaves, dead trees. And over time, this debris, if not burned, dries out and becomes the perfect kindling for the next fire. This might not seem like a terribly big issue, but because of a zero-tolerance policy, this debris just stacks up over time. Under the 1935 policy, forests can get old, and old forests means larger branches to add to this debris pile that drop at a faster rate due to nutrient-poor soil, caused by the fact that older trees aren't dying and putting their own nutrients back into the soil. On top of all of this, old forests block light and take up a lot of room and competition for a lot of water-rich vegetation that is needed to help stop wildfires in their early stages. The issue with the 1935 policy is that it worked. Wildfires in America were put out before they even began, and American forests were relatively unaffected by them. This meant, however, that instead of forests getting reset, they instead got old and filled with years and years and years of dried out debris. In short, the 1935 policy, which tried to end wildfires before they even began, ended up turning the U.S. into one giant tinderbox. And this is a consequence the current U.S. Forest Service is dealing with today, and it's almost all they're dealing with. According to the U.S. Forest Service themselves, in their 2021 budget justifications, near 50% of their entire budget goes simply to suppression of forest fires. The good news is that back in the 1970s, the Forest Service realized that this 1935 policy was extremely dangerous and switched to a policy of letting it burn, allowing smaller forest fires to burn naturally, although watching them. They also started strategically clear-cutting to help stop the spread of forest fires. Now, these are two very good steps in the right direction, but they are not near enough. The problem with clear cutting is while it gets rid of these old forests, It does not get rid of the debris. And if the debris is bad enough, which thanks to the 1935 policy, a lot of it is, a wildfire can simply cross a clear-cut field off of nothing but debris alone. The issue with the letting it burn policy is that this is random forest fires. So an area that needs to get burned often just doesn't. Now, if the U.S. Forest Service implemented a policy of proactive controlled burns to forests, this would solve most of these issues. It's not a radical idea even, because it's already being done, albeit in different biomes. According to the Minnesota DNR, organizations such as the DNR and the Forest Service themselves already use a policy of prescribed fires when dealing with management of prairies and grasslands. Hell, farmers have been using prescribed fires for years, for centuries, to help clear out their own fields. Now, these fires would be extremely beneficial to these older forests. Burning an old forest would not only clear up the old forest itself, but the debris on the ground, creating a lot of ash. This ash, once it rained, would put the nutrients back into the ground, creating a huge nutrients boost for the next generation. This next generation would be completely free to grow, with all of the light, room, and almost zero competition that they needed. A younger forest would also bring in more animals, as younger forests simply have more food to offer. These younger forests would also help mitigate wildfires themselves just by simply existing, as younger forests are a lot more water-rich and can stop wildfires before they even begin because of how water-rich they are, and because they're smaller and younger, it is a lot easier to clear-cut and have a clutter-free clear-cut should a wildfire ever occur. It is because of our 1935 policy that we currently have such a high risk in most American forests. The Forest Service has tried to fix this over the years by implementing policies, but these are not near enough. We need to implement a policy of prescribed fire or proactive controlled burns to help eliminate this risk. Looking at recent events, the fires in the Amazon in Australia, these should be taken as a warning. It was the density of the Amazon that caused it to spiral out of control, and while we are not nearly as dense as the Amazon, we have a lot of debris that has piled up over the years. And like Australia, our hot summer months has led to this debris drying out and becoming the perfect kindling. To prevent fires on the scale of the Amazon in Australia, we need to take proactive measures.